October 2017. It is also block height 489,570. This is Block Digest coming at you live from all over the world. I'm in Berlin. Where are you, Rick?
Still here in sunny Colorado, man. Things are looking pretty. How's things over there?
Yeah, really nice, actually. Really good day. Just came back from the Monero meetup and lots of images on Twitter to show you all.
Room 77?
Yeah, room 77, man. All about that place. I would consider moving to this city just for that one bar. I'm not kidding. Such a good crowd in there. Really, really bustling as well. Monkey, you've only just woken up. You've only just woken up. You're the reason we're late. I can't believe it. He just stays up.
Sorry.
I go to bed, right, like at somewhat reasonable hour. He's online in the chat. And then I wake up at like, you know, pretty late, so I like to sleep in a bit. And he's still chatting away. It's like he never stopped all night. And I'm like, Monkey, what time is it where you are? And it's like, I don't know, like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. or something. That's not unusual, is it?
I'm sorry.
Sometimes later, right? Sometimes you don't even go to bed until like the afternoon. Anyway, we also got Acnix.
Yeah, and I also have gripes with Shinobi, and I wake up this morning talking to Shinobi again. I'm like, wait, did you get some sleep?
No, exactly. And a lot of us are communicating to you right now by our mobile phonic devices. And you could I'll probably make a game out of it. If you can guess in the chat which one of us are coming from our mobiles, I'll be very impressed, because I'm super impressed with the quality of LTE these days. Janine, where are you coming from?
I'm coming from the room next door to you.
That's right. That's right. Both in Berlin right now. And okay, so should we get started? Shall we get started? Today was a really entertaining day. We're going to bring you what turns out to be an exclusive story, because nobody else has really covered this in the press. But this is the story about the SEC talking about Bitcoin. And it was kind of being reported, you know, a little bit on Twitter, also a little bit on our Bitcoin as well. So guys, did you manage to see it? Who among you actually managed to watch it live?
I watched it.
Yeah, I ended up watching the whole thing.
Oh, cool. Okay. So I also saw part of it. I didn't see all of it because I had to dash out to the Monero meetup, but I did see this. And this chap was just like the most annoying person. What was his name? I even like signaled to him on Twitter.
Damon Silvers, I believe.
Right. And yeah, so he was just giving this guy a really hard time on the left here, Adam Ludwin, who's like an entrepreneur in the space, and just like, he kept on asking like, are you a lawyer? And Adam would just like not say anything. And he was like, and then he would like try to do, he's like, you're giving me marketing, right? Right now, what I'm hearing is marketing. I want to understand Bitcoin from a legal perspective. Can you give me
Chris, are you a contract? Are you a contract, Chris? Are you a contract?
And he said something about, and then Adam goes, well, like, yeah, are you a contract? Like, is this a contract? He was trying to say, this SEC guy, right, this guy here was trying to say that cryptocurrencies are a contract, because when you download the software, you're basically agreeing to these implied terms. And he saw it as an investment, a security. All cryptocurrencies are securities, essentially, because you're profiting from the effort of others. He cited some case, so-and-so versus so-and-so from 1960, whatever. And he said, the definition of a security is very broad, and all cryptos basically are covered under it. And then one of the actual lawyers stepped in. There was this lady from Yale, and she said, well, look, if you can give me a definition of a security, I will try to answer your question. And he just said, well, I'm sure there are some people in this room that can give you the actual legal definition of what a security is, but and then he just kind of bumbled along. But yeah, he was just being an epic troll. And I wasn't that impressed with Adam, to be honest. I didn't think he put up, I think all of us in the chat room were screaming like, put me in this room now. Like, I could answer these questions better, right?
Yeah, I mean, they even elaborate further on in the the meaning that there's maybe one lawyer who can actually parse all of the legal code, and there's this kind of issue there where they're requesting access to kind of more of the back-end data just so that they can try to attempt to figure this stuff out. So it seems to be an interesting battle.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it, though, that said, obviously they were a little underinformed on the technical or rational side. I was actually relatively impressed with the nature of the arguments they were making. I think, they still had a big way to go, but they had a lot better grasp of things than I thought they would, considering the environment they were in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually sort of impressed with kind of the SEC meetings I've seen in the past to this one. It seems like there's been a lot of market change and more of a kind of gumption just to make it work.
Yeah, there was also this guy here. I put the link in the description below. You can watch Joel. This is Joel from the SEC, Joel Parker, and he's talking about DLT. He's talking about, blockchain as an abstract noun. Janine, you would love it. And you can actually look him up on the SEC website. Joel Parker, Senior Assistant Chief Accountant, works in Office 9, Beverages, Apparel, and Mining. So I see why they might have, put him into a blockchain committee. If he's like into mining, I guess they just started looking up certain keywords and just thought, yeah, why not? But yeah, so you can see that. I thought that by and large, it was, with the exception of that one guy who was, trolling the panel, and he basically had like made his mind up going into the conversation and was then just trying to, just badger the witness into saying what he wanted them to say. And I didn't feel like it was constructive. It wasn't really being argued from logic. Blake Anderson was also with us listening to it at the same time in the chat room. And yeah, we just weren't very impressed with that one guy.
Yeah,
otherwise, it was
he was ridiculous. Like, what was it? He said that the only financial innovation since the Renaissance is the ATM.
Right.
Did he forget triple book accounting?
Right. Yeah, I wasn't impressed with him at all. But there is also in the description below, you can see a summary of it on our Bitcoin. Somebody posted a summary, so you can see it there. And I can take you through it now. There was general enthusiasms about blockchains, DLT. All parties agreed that there were some real world use cases. Also, what was mentioned was the fact that these trustless systems could easily replace clearinghouses. That was discussed quite a lot, and there was, pretty much round table support for that. That eventually, maybe 5-10 years from now, that Bitcoin or a version of it will be the backbone for clearing. So that, I think everyone agreed on that. And then if anyone thinks banks are afraid of blockchains, they're wrong. Investment banking believes blockchain will remove some of the complications regarding contracts, assets, transactions. There was criticisms of cryptocurrencies, warning about speculators and FOMO. Adam Ludwin gave a technical explanation of Bitcoin Ethereum ICO's FOMO effect that was driving the price of Bitcoin. Ludwin fumbled very badly when he was asked tough questions about investor protections, contractual obligations, and what legal options do crypto investors have when they're scammed. Exit scams were briefly covered. Ludwin said that during the dot-com bubble, exit scams were pulled at a later stage after product launches failed. Now exit scams were pulled off before a product even exists. Generally, everyone agreed there is a bubble, including Ludwin himself, who has been very supportive of Bitcoin. So that's a summary of it. I don't right now have not been able to find a recording on the internet. There was just a live stream. That link is now dead. It no longer works. So if we find it, we will update you and you can go back and watch it. I highly recommend it. Any final thoughts on that before we move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because I missed the conference, I noticed Aknik said that, it came from like a different light this time. And when I was trying to find some information on it, the earliest thing I saw was talking about how the SEC's position before this was really just hands off of Bitcoin and crypto in general. They didn't really want to touch it. And then it's just really, I don't know, I find it comical that this guy's saying, don't bring in technical jargon when trying to describe Bitcoin. It's like, I don't know, hopefully they're they're changed their attitude about it, and they know they've got to adopt it and form some sort of regulation for it. But I think this is still just like they're still pretty ignorant to the fact of what it is and what it does.
Yeah. All right. SegWit2x, the saga continues. It's just the gift that keeps on giving. F2 Pool deals possible death blow to SegWit2x fork, withdraws support. Check it out. That tweet from Jameson Lopp, I actually saw it when I was in room 77. Monkey, come on.
I love Wang Chun.
Come
I love
on.
Wang Chun. One thing I do have to take an opportunity to shit on Cointelegraph. They withdrew their support a while ago. They just didn't want to reboot their server to get rid of the Coinbase signaling for no reason.
Oh, okay.
but yeah,
oh, okay.
this is
all they did was basically remove the signaling in the Coinbase transaction.
Wang Chun actually kept his word. It's kind of shocking.
Yeah. Well, I also, featured this story mostly so that I could just, feature this kind of artwork because Charlene sent me this over DM. Never fork without consensus. End crypto rape. Always use protection. No 2x. And let's look at this one. Bitcoin lovers never rush to fork. How about that? So some good apparel there. Great. Yeah, maybe Joel from the SEC can get in on this since he's like into his apparel. That's a lol. So there you go. All right.
The day of the freaking memes.
Yeah. And so it turns out that BTC-e won't be supporting this, SegWit2x hard fork. After the news about SegWit2x proposal, they say for Bitcoin's hard fork, the cryptocurrency platform Wex.nz declares it will not support the division for Bitcoin's cryptocurrency into competing chains. New trading pairs will not appear. The management of the exchange consider the results of this division to be questionable, both for trades and for the cryptocurrency system as a whole. During the hard fork, trade on the platform will not be interrupted and will work on a regular mode. Sincerely, Wex team. There you go. So the new suited and booted BTC-e, now known as Wex, they still managed to get it in the same font. I like that. It's all like, good continuous branding. The troll box just isn't the way it used to be, though, is it, guys? Do you find?
Hey, there's still a troll box.
There is still a troll box, yeah. But it just hasn't got the same old people in there. They all moved. So BTC not supporting it. Blockchain, though, on the other hand, are encouraging users to buy Ethereum if they want to make transactions near the date. Is that right, Shani?
Yeah, I mean, a bunch of people have already pointed out that they haven't used Blockchain.info in a long time, and Blockchain.info recently added support for Ethereum, I think. I don't know how long ago that was. But yeah, they're saying that in order to avoid transaction difficulties or whatever during the fork, that they recommend people just buy Ethereum and then they can keep transacting, which I think is a little weird for them to request people.
Well, it's a great way to pump Ethereum's price, but I don't know if they've checked the Bitcoin price recently. It is mooning. It's absolutely mooning. And this is actually off the back of the fact that Jamie Dimon, featured in today's artwork, of course, said that he wasn't going to talk about Bitcoin anymore. Rick, why don't you talk about that? It was you that suggested it, right? That story.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think it's hysterical because this is one of those situations where somebody who's really prominent in a space puts his foot in his mouth because he doesn't quite understand the upcoming tech. And, it's, let me pull my notes up on this real quick. It says, the whole time that he was saying this, he says on these quotes from this, I wouldn't put this high on the category of important things in the world, but I'm not going to talk about Bitcoin anymore. So that was his actual quote. And, there it is again. He doesn't understand it, saying it's not really highly important for the world. And then the CFO of JP Morgan, though, goes on to say, we are open-minded for digital currencies that are properly controlled and regulated. And, you know, they're part of that Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. They formed that and partnered with Zcash. And, you know, they're doing a lot of blockchain work over there at JP Morgan. And, you know, this is Dimon not understanding what is going on within his own sector there. And that's why we did the artwork like that. And just a quick shout out to 8K1309 on Reddit for helping with the idea there with Bob Ross.
Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks a lot for that, guys. That was excellent artwork for today's show. And yeah, really good collaborative effort. So he's going to shut his mouth now. I mean, it sounds a lot like the Putin thing. Like they make a statement on one day and then the next day it's like, oh, whoops. And then they retract it, but they get a bit of a dip in the meantime. Do you notice that?
Oh, yeah. You know, he bought that dip.
Yeah, right. Like Putin bought the dip. They just like open their mouths.
But his CFO did.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So just cut. Monkey, do you want to come in?
I was just gonna say real quick, like all of the shit talk in the main media, this is a bubble, this is a crash coming nonsense. In my mind, this is just point blank. Big investors and institutional investors want the price to go down so they can get in. And like I've literally had a close friend of mine call me 3 times in the wee hours of the morning this week to tell me to sell all of my coins because he was worried about me with all of this shit in the mainstream news. And then pop, like they're clearly just trying to push the price down so they can get in.
Yeah, they don't get it, do they? We get it because we've been around for a long time, you and me. So we're used to this. But I think a lot of normies, they just don't get it. And this is the artwork I was referring to. Rick did a fantastic job on that. That's actually an amalgamation of a few different images there. You got the Bitfinex chart on the right, which you actually made yourself, right?
Yeah, that's actually today's chart. So
today's
that's no
chart.
fraud.
Yeah. And then you got Jamie in the background. It's just perfect. Really well done. Great job. And I know you put a lot of time into that.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, back to SegWit2x. Sorry, I took a bit of a detour there. Now, we've got the 16,000 members of the Seoul Meetup group in South Korea. Have written a letter saying that they are against the New York agreement in SegWit2x. That's a lot of people. I thought the idea of the New York agreement was that the businesses signed it and the businesses represented the users, right, Monkey? So why have we got so many users that disagree with it? Like I was at the Monero meetup. There was easily 30 people there. I didn't meet a single person that was in favor of the New York agreement. Everyone I spoke to were like, well, everyone's talking about it, right? Like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this fork in November? Everyone like wants to know what everyone else is thinking. And everyone either thought it was like a game of chicken. I heard phrases like, it's a game of chicken. Is it even going to happen? And just like, it's just going to be complicated.
Well, it's just users. Like we're here for monetary sovereignty. Like we're here to take responsibility for our own shit and try to get away from all of the custodial gateways that pretty much just wreak havoc on our lives. And you know, it's not going to be a simple bait and switch to just get us to go along with a corporate hijacking like this. And people can stick their fingers in their ear and go la 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 and pretend they don't hear it all they want. But at the end of the day, you know, our voices are going to be heard. And if you don't listen, you're just going to get wrecked by the market at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Bob Barker was saying some interesting stuff in the chat earlier about martyrdom. And he said he's like throughout his whole life, he said that he has always martyred himself for doing the right thing. Like a lot of people say, oh, you know, I couldn't blow the whistle on this because it meant I would have lost my job or something like that. But he says like throughout his life, he's tried to be consistent. And even if it means he fucks himself in the process, he will still do what it takes to do the right thing. And I feel like most people in this industry right now, they wake up in the morning and they're not even trying to do the right thing. They're not even trying to be decent human beings. They're just blown around by the incentives. They're like leaves in the wind. They just get blown around. And then there are some of us that see the bigger picture, that we see the system at a much higher resolution. And we see the incentive structures and we understand how important they are. And when we see people acting in this predictable, deterministic manner, juxtaposed with technology, robots and computing and automation, we just see these humans as somehow more like machines and more predictable and less autonomous. Did anyone else get that sense? Are you seeing it the way I am?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is what we've been talking about with like the infighting even within the companies themselves. And, you know, and then you see this 16,000 plus users coming together to say that they don't support this. And it's just really goes to show that there's a lot of support behind the legacy chain and what is Bitcoin. And, you know, I really like their last line of that statement where this could maybe reach out to those other guys. It says, quote, "Remember, there is no shame in readjusting one's stance in light of new information and conditions. Do the right thing." So please, guys, you know, like, I mean, I hope y'all got, you know, everybody understands on that side that this is a network of users and that's what's important. And it's important to keep those users happy so they keep using Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's a really good quote. It's actually 1,600, not 16,000. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, sorry.
But,
yeah, globally, I think Rick's probably right and probably undershooting by a lot.
Yeah, I think this sums up pretty much how most of the community feel about this whole thing. So any final thoughts on SegWit2x? Because I also want to talk about what Bitcoin Core is doing right now to improve scaling. And this is the introduction of Shnor Signatures, which apparently, according to this article in CoinDesk, by Alyssa Hertig, really like her work actually. Really thorough article. Highly recommend you give it a good read. Apparently, so at the moment we're using ECDSA, right? And that means that there's quite a lot of data that has to be downloaded and validated. But the idea of using the Shnor signatures is that we can do away with a lot of that signature data. And apparently some of the research that was being read on it, wasn't very good. And then someone came across a paper that was better and actually, suggested a better way of doing this. And now, again, what we have is an improvement to the efficiency of the Bitcoin protocol as a network, I should say, rather than just trying to make the roads wider or trying to build roads to places where people aren't going to go or, anything, just raising capacity. Instead, they're trying to streamline and make what the protocol as it currently is as efficient as it can be. Monkey?
Yeah,
this is actually...
All right, Nick. Negotiate amongst yourselves.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it looks really nice. Like, they have their own AppSig module to encapsulate like all of the Schnorr signature aggregation, which is pretty good. So it kind of like keeps it nice and tidy there. So, and overall, this is going to reduce like the amount of just signature data that's going to be contained in each block, which, is going to help keep the fees down and aids in scaling. And you're basically just able to sign more efficiently for TXs consisting of more than a few inputs. And yeah, I don't know, I think it makes sense. And I think that potentially offers more interesting things that we can do in the future, maybe regarding UTXO sets and such.
Yeah, I mean, this really like shows, the core dev team isn't messing around. Like Schnorr is actually it's like almost 20 years old at this point, I think, and the only reason that it's not really widely used in cryptographic products is because it was patented, and these patents have all started lapsing lately and are not being renewed, so they're open to public use. But it's really like we have the like EDS or EDCSA signature algorithm right now, which is widely used in most things, and Schnorr is actually just the all around more efficient way to do things. But everybody's kind of had to settle for like the less efficient way of using signatures just because this was patented. And this is really nice to see. Like Bitcoin is going to be, I think, one of the first public open projects to really use the more efficient algorithm for signatures. And like Chris was saying, when they actually took their paper on fraud proofs for aggregated signatures and submitted it to a cryptographic conference and got the second paper back that was actually more secure and efficient with this, like they're not playing around when they're tinkering with the cryptographic components of the system. Like they're actually doing their full due diligence and actually reaching out to the actual experts dealing with this topic before they start just tinkering with things in the system. Like they're actually taking it seriously.
Yeah, cool. And Charlene, did you want to comment on this tweet by Elizabeth Starr?
Yeah, so this was tweeted about 3 hours ago, and I thought we should mention it on the show because basically the Lightning team has announced that they've released a test desktop app. So if you want to try out Lightning Network, I don't know, I haven't looked into the details of what it allows you to do or what kind of contributions you'd be making in terms of testing, but definitely check it out because, who was it? I believe it was Mike Belshie a year ago who said that SegWit and Lightning weren't going to be, they basically weren't going to have any development for a number of years. They wouldn't be ready. And it's like, oh, look, hey, Mike Belshie, check it out. Maybe you should see how developed it is.
Yeah, indeed. And any final thoughts on this?
I'm excited to test it out.
Yeah, me too, actually. Yeah, I am as well. Because the transaction that we did at room 77 took ages because like the confirmation's really slow. They're running this really old app on this old Android phone. It takes forever for them to even get it. I'm like showing them the blockchain, right? I'm showing them like the transaction hash. They're not, the guys behind the bar don't always understand the technicals of Bitcoin. So they're just looking at me like a dog that's just been shown a card trick. All right, Equifax. It's another gag that just keeps on giving. Charlene?
Yeah, I feel like I tweeted this earlier, but I feel like Equifax is trying to write the script for the ultimate InfoSec horror movie just in time for Halloween because all they need, they've already had shit credentials like admin for a password to one of their portals. They've had a multinational data breach. By the way, the number of UK citizens affected is now in the double-digit millions, not hundreds of thousands. So it's significantly more people. They also, what else did they have? They had they had you using your social security number, which has supposedly been compromised as a way to log into their credit monitoring service that they've been offering. And now they have a apparent attempt. It sounds like their new website's been hacked and someone has been serving fake flash updates through the website. So basically all they need to make this script more exciting is to add some kind of ransomware botnet with IoT devices running Windows 7 or something. And then you'd have the ultimate InfoSec horror movie. So this, the hack was apparently discovered by this guy, Randy. Oh.
Randy?
And, yeah,
Randy, yeah.
Sorry, can't hear anybody in the back. I thought I froze for a second. So yeah, it was discovered by him. And he said, let's see, I'll read it. So he said that he used a number of different virus detection software like Panda, Symantec, and WebRoot, and they all labeled it as adware. So it might be some kind of malvertising attack. But yeah, it just shows, I mean, the only thing worse than getting flash updates is getting fake flash updates. So I think this is just another, nail in the coffin for Equifax because if you can't even protect your own website from something like this, then I don't know what you're doing on the back end with all of the rest of the data that you're trying to gather and protect.
Yeah, that has been
Yeah, like
no. Go on, Agnes.
Yeah, like how can you maintain data integrity? Well, if you're not able to do the data science, how are you going to protect the so-called data science? Like, ugh, what a mess.
They're being made to look like complete fools. And I think like every hacker out there right now is just like taking as many pot shots as they can, testing every single vector, every single attack surface is up for grabs. And it's just creating this relentless, snowball of releases in the media where they just look more and more ridiculous every day and not fit for purpose whatsoever. All right. So the chat room, James Bond says, I thought, yeah, the miners control the network. Well, yeah, the miners are users actually. So I don't know how that really works. So you're saying like miners control the network, not the users. I think here you go. Miners are more important than users, but miners are users. That is they just have some equipment and they're able to do some hashing, but they still require propagation on the network, right? That still requires the transactions to be validated, to be passed along. So I think they're both the same thing. And what else we got? Just a lot of trolling by the looks of it. Should I sell stock of Equifax? Probably, James. Probably you should, I imagine. And Monkey's in there. What are you doing? Oh, do you want me to show this meme? Probably the best meme.
Shilling my meme.
Shilling your meme. And, Monkey doesn't get paid for this. It's all Creative Commons CC 0 license. But here you go. Here it is.
That's my meme.
That's his meme.
That was a good laugh this morning. Thanks for that.
Yeah, very good.
I aim to please.
And Paula is saying that miners secure the network. They do. So do the users. And if the users stop securing the network won't be secure anymore because, who's going to watch the watches? Everyone is responsible for securing the network. And it's, if we're not going to bother with validating transactions anymore, then I don't see the point of using a blockchain, really. Like, why bother with mining? If you're going to do away with validating nodes, do away with miners as well, because you may as well just go back to using an Oracle database. We'll just get, from now on, we're just going to trust a group of people. You don't need to bother with the mining process. That whole thing can be left out. One of the things that came up in the SEC meeting actually was this single source of truth. They actually went back, and Wojciech's in the chat, and we've spoken about this with him in the Mumble as well, which is one of my favorite parts of the Bitcoin white paper, was this idea that Satoshi puts forward about the longest proof of work chain will be accepted as the truth, whilst people look the other way, whilst everyone is kind of going to bed and they wake up in the morning. They need to know. I mean, who really sits there, every night counting all their money exactly so that they know how much is there? Often, we put money in certain places, we forget that it's there. We have to trust the custodians to look after us. Well, now we don't have to. Now we have this mathematical purity in this algorithm. Plus we have a global interconnected network of networks called the internet. And we have computers that are now pretty much commoditized, and we can all have computers at relatively low cost. So really, yes, Charlene, you do count your cash. It's true. Charlene loves to count all the cash, but not everyone has time to do that. And in order for me to remember, exactly how much I had, at the moment with the custodial model, we have to trust that they're not going to lie to us about what our balance was, right? I mean, how are you going to know? You're going to keep track of everything? I mean, you just trust that your bank isn't lying to you. Your bank could be taking a penny a day out of your account. You wouldn't even notice, would you? Right? Whereas with Bitcoin, you can't even do that, right? No one can change those numbers in your address without your private key, right? Nobody can, right? Only your private key has the ability to change the numbers in that database. And that is fundamentally a very, very important concept. Is essentially a state transition system. And if you're going to do away with any part of the system, you may as well say, let's do away with the whole system. If we do away with the users are not going to care anymore. fine then. The developers can be hijacked and they can start implementing features. They can inflate the supply if they want to, because the users don't care. They're just idiots. And they don't have the intelligence to figure this out for themselves. I would say actually the security of the network depends heavily on the users being informed, self-directed, independent thinkers. Because if they're not, then they might fall foul to this kind of, you know, this kind of political game playing that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I think that was just a great summary right there of why this is kind of aggravating to some people, where it's like emotions get drawn high, is because we see this as such a powerful, possible world-changing revolution. And, you know, it's just like you hear this sort of thing of like, well, let's just forget it and do this. And, you know, the same sort of thing, but just with a more inefficient way of doing it. It's aggravating. But, you know, like the statement said from that Seoul Meetup group, hopefully these people will take in this information and change their mind and do the right thing.
Yeah. So any final thoughts? James says he'll do whatever Chris tells him to do. Very funny. I see what you did there. See what you did there. I'm a thought leader. I'm a guru. If you pay me 0.1 BTC, I'll tell you what the future is going to be. And
Oh,
James,
wonderful.
think for
No, be your
yourself.
own
Don't
thought
be
leader.
a cock.
Be your own thought
Don't
leader.
be a cock, James.
no, you need thought leaders because you're too stupid, okay, to make up your own mind. Just follow the crowd. Do whatever the loud voices say.
Well, just because S&P has an issue with leadership, and they've decided, oh, leadership is the huge issue. To try and apply those ideals to Bitcoin, like there's leaders here through independent thought. And I can't emphasize the importance of independent thought in this space.
Yeah, because you know it doesn't sound sexy? Thought follower. Doesn't sound that good, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. Did we want to bring up, have a discussion similar to what we were discussing yesterday in the chat room, Monkey? Or do you need more coffee? Maybe another time we want to do that.
If you can remind my brain what that was, I think I can handle it.
All right, let me give you the gambit that I came in with. I came in partway through the conversation. It went on for a very long time. And we were talking about the block size debate. And I said, we're really having two conversations here. We're talking about how we make decisions on the upgrading of the network in the future. And we're talking about the particulars of what do we do in this particular upgrade situation? How do we, you know, decide on what the block size should be? And those are two conversations. And to have this in a way that where you argue from first principles and you adhere to logic and you avoid things like ad hominem, no true Scotsman, all those kind of logical fallacies, in order to have a recondite and an erudite, debate that is informed, that is educated, you really have to make category distinctions. And that means category distinctions means separating all of the various topics into their right category and then discussing one at a time, rather than trying to dilute the debate and actually having, you know, argument across purposes and all kinds of things like that. So one of the things that I think somebody said to Mop, BTC Mop, Stephen, who used to come on here at the beginning when we just launched the show, said that, look, when you got into Bitcoin, you signed up for a 1 megabyte block size. And I said, well, I don't think necessarily that you did. I think what you signed up for was a system of governance as it was at the time, that, you know, you trusted these particular developers to make decisions on your behalf. You presumably, by buying this asset, thought that the decisions in the previous had been the right ones. Otherwise, why were you buying them? Generally, people don't buy assets expecting them to go down in value. So there is an implied trust there. You're trusting the Bitcoin core developers to make good decisions. And you, let's argue, are not a computer scientist, so you have to trust that they're going to make reasonably good decisions, but you also trust that because it's open source, that other community members can inspect the code and that no foul play is reasonably possible because, you know, people are going to spot it. I don't think necessarily you signed up for the particular 1 megabyte block size. I think you signed up for a way in which decisions can be made.
Okay, yeah. You jogged my brain a bit. And yeah, I was actually the one that said that. But I didn't mean necessarily that you signed up for like the 1 megabyte block and then that's just it. But you signed up for a system that had a 1 megabyte block at the time, with no guarantees that that's going to change. And just because it was widely assumed, and I don't even really think it was. It was a large group of people assumed, but I wouldn't say everybody did. But just because like a segment of people assume that's going to change doesn't necessarily mean it will. And just because you came into something that had the current state of affairs and assumed affairs would change in a particular way doesn't really mean that you can expect that it will. Like ultimately, this is a disparate group of people that are just, it's like a mob, and the mob is just moving in the same direction. And you can't really have an expectation that that mob is just going to pack all their stuff up and start moving in the direction that you want them to, just because that's the direction you want the mob to move in. And, you know, ultimately, like, yes, a lot of people aren't really equipped to completely, like, make the informed decisions themselves. They are going to have to some degree, like, outsource that trust. But ultimately, like, this was the state of things when you got here. And if we can't get the entire mob on the same page to move in a different direction, well, it's going to keep moving in the direction that it is. And that leaves you with the choice: are you going to stick with that mob, or are you going to break off and form your own mob?
Yeah.
And ultimately, yeah.
No, finish
was
your point.
Well, it's pretty much like, you know, it's when I got here, like I had a whole slew of ideas on where this was going. And pretty much at the end of the day, I arrived to a spectrum of possibilities. And for maybe the past 2 years or so, I have been open to the possibility that, you know, Bitcoin might not go the way I want it to. Like it very well could have just ballooned into PayPal 2.0. It could also have never gotten any upgrade like SegWit whatsoever, and could have just potentially turned into a gold clearinghouse. Like, you know, for all we knew 6 months ago, SegWit wasn't going to come in. That's what it was going to be forever. And it would just turn into a waiting list where you would months to clear your digital gold through the house to somebody else. And that was a possibility. And like ultimately, like people need to step back and realize that, you know, if we can't get everybody on the same page, then we have the status quo. And that will evolve through not evolving in whatever way it will. And you either deal with that or you go and do something else with something else. And I mean, it might suck. It might be hard for people to hear that and process that, but that's just the reality of the situation.
Well, another point I'd like to make is I think it will become very apparent in this network when we do need to actually increase that block size. Very apparent. And we have SegWit. Like, we can scale up into this whole area now. And I think once we start reaching the upper bounds of SegWit, again, it will be very, very obvious that, like, this is what we need to do.
Yeah. So a few things, thoughts that came to mind as you were talking, Shinobi, was I've met people in my life that are resistant to mess, and some might say chaos, disorganization. But some of the brightest people, some of the most intelligent people I've met in my life are pretty messy, right? They live in this kind of, you know, professor's kind of lab, and they've got all the mad scientists and it's junk everywhere, but like the character Rick in Rick and Morty, right? Like his garage is like full of like junk and stuff. But it's not a mess in his head because he has a map, and his brain is able to hold that information. Not just the array. He's not, you know, remembering it like a grid. He's remembering the paths, you know, how, you know, this particular object relates to that object over there. And there's a certain resistance I see in this community to that kind of chaotic kind of, you know, intelligent way of organizing things, because that's what we see in nature. Nature isn't organized like a grid. It is actually quite chaotic and it is messy, but it works. It's always beautiful. And I think that's what I think there are certain people in this industry that just want things to be like top down because that's what they're used to, and their brains like that because that's simple. I can handle that. I've got a heuristic for this. I know this. I'm more comfortable here. Whereas when you're like, if you're a business like Coinbase, you've got investors, you've got maybe a certain agenda. We actually met a former Coinbase developer tonight. Maybe we can talk about that another time. But it kind of, they don't want to leave their business in the hands of this, you know, chaotic, anarchic group of individuals that are making decisions that they don't deem in the interests of their growth strategy or their, you know, go-to market or their, you know, exit strategy with the Lambos and whatever they've got pictured in their mind, right? The bro down. The anarchy significantly impacts their bro down, as Rick would say, right? And so that's how I would frame it. I'm not trying to deliver any answers here. I'm just saying that's how I picture this.
Yeah, I'd say it's a very good breakdown of like the different sides or the spectrum, I guess you could say, of how people are looking at this thing from different angles.
I mean, James agrees with me, saying he loves it when Chris talks his bullshit. Thanks. Blah, 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 blah. Aristotle. There you go. That's me.
Yeah, just for the record, I really didn't like that picture. If that person who made it is watching, I really didn't.
I was a bit, I just looked at it and I was like, is that an insult? I can't really tell if he's just like joking around or whatever. But, so the other thing I wanted to mention, I'm just going through the chat to see if anyone's said anything intelligent. Apparently you haven't, you know, just being trolls today. No, Paula, you did say that if you would actually stop using Bitcoin if someone was actually in charge. I'm leaving Bitcoin if someone becomes in charge. And she also says, I vote not to have a leader. Let's just continue fighting. Damn straight. Like, and this is something I was saying in the chat as well with Mop, and maybe we should get him on actually, because I like hearing, you know, the other side of the debate, is that we need a space for this. Like, we need to accept a few things. First of all, Bitcoin is open source. That means that when you create an open source project, you are surrendering the ability to control that project going forward. That is something you just have to accept. And second of all, that the blockchain belongs to the commons. It belongs to everybody. So long as everyone has access to it, they download it locally to their hard drive. There's no copyright on the blockchain. There's no patents in the code that generates that blockchain. And as a result, you can't stop somebody from forking. And really, I think what Bitfinex have shown, you know, with this new chain split token contract in the last week or two, is that there has to be a way that you deal with a lot of these changes that are extraneous to the protocol itself. You can't do everything in the protocol, right? The code itself is not enough. You need actually an environment around that code that is conducive to the improvement of that code, right? And that means that if somebody decides to take the UTXO set, the Genesis block and all, and say, right, we're going to fork at this block height, either prospectively or retrospectively, then you need a mechanism, a social mechanism of how do we deal with this now? So for Bitfinex, that means we need a liquidity pool before the fork happens so that we can ease into it, so that all those margin positions can be settled out ahead of time to make sure they've got the right amount of collateral on balance, to make sure that, you know, people don't get wrecked, to make sure lenders get their coins as well, and the margin longs can also get paid. So there's that element of it. And also there's the forward pricing mechanism that you get with the market. When you actually list these tokens, there is a way for the market to look at the miners as well, that can actually see what they think the market thinks the price is worth. And you do in Bitcoin, as with ordinary politics, you have the incumbency problem, right? Which is that if you're an incumbent, if you're in a position of power already, if you're a president or prime minister or king, it's yours to lose, not your opponents to win. A lot of opponents run for office and they think that they're going to win because they're so clever, but it's actually not you. that wins the race. It's the incumbent that loses it. And as it is with Bitcoin Core, is that they are extant. They exist already in the space. They've had all this reputation. Everyone follows them. People will generally stick with what they know more than what they don't. And there are people that blindly follow, Bitcoin Core and other members of Blockstream and so forth. They think that, Adam Back is very, very smart. They're always going to listen to him no matter what. And there are also people that do the same on the other side of this debate. So, when you talk about it, I think you do need a framework, an environment, as I say, that it surrounds the code, not just the code itself. We can't automate everything away.
Yeah, I mean, we're human beings at the end of the day interacting with something, and at the end of the day, you can't remove the human being from a human thing, and really, if somebody found a way to, I don't think I'd want to.
Now, did anyone else have any points to make? Because I've got another rant.
No, go for it, man.
All right. So the other thing that came up in the conversation the other day was there are pre-existing problems. If you want to understand Bitcoin, to understand Bitcoin is to understand the historical context with which Bitcoin emerged. You have to understand that Bitcoin came along not in 1997 when it was technically feasible to exist. It came along in 2009. It came along right as social media was taking off. And it came really at the end of a burgeoning software as a service industry. Now, let me take you back to the 90s. If any of you were using, dial-up back then, or any of you were using software, quite regularly, you will remember that if you wanted to install an update, or if the developers rolled out an update, you would normally be sent a floppy disk or a CD, or you'd have to go and buy the CD. And maybe you'd have a serial number that would give you an entitlement to an upgrade. Now, in that model, it was a pull-based model. Now, as a developer, and you work in user experience and user design, you have this concept of end-user compliance. And end-user compliance is, well, as a designer, I design a product and I build it to a specification based on what I perceive as being the goals of the end user, right? So I have to anticipate ahead of time the concerns, the fears, the desires of these people, remembering all the while that the user really just exists in my head. I never really know what the user wants, but I have some idea in my mind. But what I have that the user doesn't have is I have expertise. I have things that they do not know, and they presumably wish to outsource a lot of that expertise. In Greek, it would be the episteme, okay, the knowledge. And the end user would have what was called the doxa, right? That means the opinion. And so they would have an opinion. They would look through the array of products that were on offer, and they would form an opinion. They would say, okay, I think this product is right, based on the episteme, the knowledge of the engineer who would craft it, who would spend their lives. And that's because as an engineer, I dedicate my life to this specialism. And the end user can go off and have other specialisms. They can go off and become a teacher, a plumber, a police officer, whatever they want. Now, you are not always going to get in engineering software development end user compliance. And in particular, in the area of public key cryptography and security, end user compliance is very important. Not so bad if it's desktop publishing. Someone makes a mistake, well, too bad, they have to print out that document again, and they have to use different settings next time. And we all remember how bad desktop publishing was in the 90s. Like, you were there for hours just trying to print stuff out, and it would never quite fit on the page correctly, and you'd always have to set up. Terrible user experience. When you mess up user experience in security-based things, like, with your PIN number on a banking site, or with your Trezor today, Ledger wallets, the hardware wallets, right? If that user experience is broken, bad things happen. People start to lose money. And when you're building software all the time, it requires the consent. You have this ongoing negotiation with the end user in terms of the intentions that you anticipate as an engineer, deploying that, and them executing it according to what you understood at the time designing it, right? And those two things don't always match. Now, what happened with software as a service was that instead of having to send out a floppy disk or a CD every time a developer wanted to roll out an update, instead, the software was all hosted on a server in the cloud, and people would just log in, and then updates could be passively rolled out without the user having any clue. So now you weren't consenting to a snapshot of the software. You weren't consenting to this version of Photoshop, right? The, you know, Photoshop CS or whatever, right? Because I really liked Photoshop CS, actually. I didn't like some of the improvements they were putting in later versions. So I just stuck with it for the longest time, didn't upgrade. And whereas with the SaaS model, what you're consenting to actually is a product. You're not consenting to a piece of software, a snapshot. You're consenting to a product that is always subject to change. It's fluid and it might change in the future. But how do you as an engineer, how do you have that trust and that relationship with your end user? If you're just able to deploy updates like terms of adhesion in regular terms of service on websites where, you know, the company has to take some measure to make you aware of changes to those terms of service, but we all know that we don't really read them, and that's kind of like this unspoken thing. But as an engineer, and in particular in security, you can't just wave that off. You can't just say, okay, it's fine for you to slip changes in. And especially when it comes to Bitcoin. Bitcoin came in at 2009, as I said. It came in well after software as a service had become, you know, very well established. And this idea that we can just, and this is what I'm hearing from the Node2x's, and I'm hearing it from people like Roger Ver, is this passive rollout model of like, we'll just roll out the changes and the users don't really have to understand how this works. You know, $20,000 full nodes, like no discussion. Yeah, Shanine's saying in the chat, no discussion. Like, let's just push this out because users, the assumption, the underlying assumption is the users are too stupid to understand this, right? I can't, am I mischaracterizing it? I don't think I'm mischaracterizing it.
No,
what other assumption am I supposed to make?
That's the exact impression I get, is that they just think the users are incredibly dumb. In my experience, it's not the way I've seen large populations of the world react to fairly complex things. It may seem on the outside or at first like they don't understand or something like that. Maybe they just don't give a shit because they're so upset that it doesn't work, you know, and they're just getting by because they can still get by for now.
Yeah, and there was a great video from Andreas Antonopoulos today because someone asked him at a meetup in Bali whether Bitcoin is a good investment vehicle. Like, is it a good, like she used this phrase, put your Bitcoins to work, as in, you know, yield and all that. And his reply was that Bitcoin is not a get rich quick scheme. It's a get free scheme, as in get freedom. And so I feel like, you know, if you're not on board with the get free scheme, then, you know, you're basically just a software as a service model.
Right. I want to pick up on what Paul is saying. She's like, yeah, I know, Chris, I liked Mosaic on Windows 3.1. Why do we all have to upgrade? And it's really about consenting to the upgrade. And I'm not talking about operating systems either. I'm talking about, in particular, your money, and making sure that those updates can't just be slipped in by the back door by a group of developers. By making it opt-in rather than opt-out, you're changing that relationship between the end user and the developer. And that affects the way you know, things happen with end user compliance, right? So the reason why Bitcoin Core have decided to go with the soft fork approach isn't so much because they all disagree with the notion that we should have bigger base block sizes. I think a lot of them have said that they do want bigger base block sizes in the long run. That was one of the disappointments for me in this debate, was that it was just so binary and it wasn't granular, and we didn't actually say, okay, this person is an individual and they think this, and they may agree with a base block size increase on these conditions, and that, you know, there was no continuum there. It was just like you were either a big blocker or you were a small blocker. And what we're talking about is that when software is rolled out, that the users be given a choice about what features they want, and they certainly shouldn't be forced into having certain features that they don't, that they certainly wouldn't live with, right? And with software as a service, you can certainly hide that. When you are forced to deliver, source code and binaries, the reason why Core chose to go with this backwards compatibility model was that it gave everyone as much time as was technically possible whilst keeping the network under reasonably good, healthy conditions. After all, I mean, we were told that the block size was going to, kill the chain. And we were told that if we didn't upgrade immediately to bigger blocks, that, hell would break loose and we wouldn't have any, it would be a nightmare. But here we are today, and we have many empty blocks being mined, and sometimes it's actually quite quiet on the blockchain. The mempool's pretty empty. So when you do that, what the engineers are trying to do at the moment is they're trying to get a good balance. And they're trying to get the balance between what the network needs and what the end user needs. It's about listening to wants, but providing for needs, because actually users don't know what they want. I mean, they may think they do, and they'll certainly be vocal about it, but they won't necessarily be very good at knowing or understanding what they need. And that's because they don't have the episteme. They don't have the knowledge. They're not engineers. They're not specialists in their field. So Monkey.
Yeah, and like also like that, there's also like a moral aspect, I would say, in a lot of developers' minds. And like I think most of them just feel on a moral or ethical level, they just don't have the right to impose anything on the users or decide for them. I think they look at their role in this ecosystem more as somebody offering users choices. And when it comes to something like a hard fork, that there really is no way to do that except through imposition on some level. And I just think most of them just view that as morally reprehensible. Like it's antithetical to that mentality of offering users choices.
Yeah, it is a moral issue. Absolutely. And I think business people find it very difficult to make moral decisions, or even not moral decisions, just ethical discussions are often just resistant in, they're just completely anathema in a business discussion. I've had a number of meetings with startups before where, I've gone in and they've asked me for help or whatever, and I've sat in on a meeting and I'm like, but is this actually the right thing to do? And I even had one instance where the CEO, actually, it wasn't even me he was talking to. He was talking to a lawyer who had been hired for this business. And the lawyer raised an ethical concern about what they were doing with the user's data and all that kind of stuff. And the CEO turned around and said, don't give me that moral bullshit. Or I don't have time, actually. He said, I don't have time for this moral bullshit. I've got a meeting to go to. I've got to speak to investors. I don't have time for this. Just build what I've said that we need to build, because this is what the investors want. And what the investors wanted, of course, was, privacy violating features that, gathers as much data on the user, because that's what they can sell on to the next guy. So it is a moral discussion. Like, as an engineer, right, as an ethical engineer, particularly if it's Bitcoin, you're voluntary, you don't want to violate that trust that you have with your users. And I think it is a violation of trust when you start to implement features, secretly, that aren't necessarily for the benefit of those users. And Paula says, I'm okay with 2 megabyte blocks. It's a good compromise. I don't want 8 megabytes, but I do want SegWit. Can't we have 2x, but let Core run it? Then everyone will be happy. Paula, you're one of the best trolls ever. And you're just, all these points you're making are just really good. I really like the way you're phrasing it. Yeah, can't we just like compromise, guys? Can't we just like, Monkey, come on, 2 megabytes, come on. That's not unreasonable, is it?
Well, we have it. Like, people just need to upgrade to SegWit. I mean, like Blockchain.info, like earlier with that blog post, I was legitimately pissed off. Their node, they're still running off of a 0.07 node. Like, and this is a fact. The last time that their node crashed, their mempool dropped to 0. It escapes me at the moment, but one of the latest core releases updated to actually save the mempool on disk so that it's not dropped to 0 during a crash or a reboot. Theirs didn't. So as a statement of objective fact, their node is prior to that. they're just hacking stuff on top of this older version. Like, they have not even implemented SegWit yet because they're wasting time working on Bcash and this nonsense with this fork. Like, they are one of the most incompetent businesses in this space, and they could very easily push us a big way towards having 2 megabyte blocks right now with SegWit. But instead of that, they are pushing this corporatist attitude where the users should just shut up and do what they say. We have 2 megabytes right now. It's right there. It's unlocked, waiting to be used. And the only thing that needs to happen is businesses actually need to get off their ass and implement the thing waiting for them. But they don't. And it legitimately pisses me off. It's an insult to most of the user base in this ecosystem.
I can't. So all their wallets are really running on 0.07 code. Is that right?
Yeah, their backend node is an old version of Core that they're just hacking things on top of, and they haven't actually updated to the most recent version of Core. And if you really want to be a nitpicker, I mean, you could argue that this is negligence in protecting consumer funds because they're not using secure tested software to do so. They're just hacking things on top of an old implementation with old consensus rules.
Yeah, and I mean, I do not envy the experience that their customer service is going to have, because I have experienced their service on a very minor issue in the past, and they are absolutely terrible. They don't get back to you. They ignore you. I don't even want to know what's going to happen with all this forking business when they have customers coming to them, like, not understanding what they're supposed to do. And yeah, that's going to be a train wreck.
Great. Well, this has been a very lively discussion. What do we want to do?
I'll just make one comment about this whole discussion as far as like open source and closed source, you know, like, because I was a kid playing around with open source software, and I didn't recognize that, you know, the difference really once it happened, as far as like rolling upgrades that I wasn't paying attention to. And, you know, nowadays we see so many things where that rolling update has put in some backdoor where people's information are being spied on. And, you know, that security, like you were talking about, it's already been broken in a lot of ways with a lot of different things on the internet. And I feel like whenever I found Bitcoin, it was like, oh, here's this way back to that where it was my choice. And I didn't even really recognize it until it was there. And I said, oh, you know, it really shocked me. I said, and that's when I just got wrapped up in the space and fell back in. And I really love that this open source environment is still around.
We're getting a bit emotional there, Rick.
Oh, yeah. You know, I mean, like, I've seen absolute authority take control in a couple of different places. You know, I was in the Army, and it's deadly. It's deadly. I mean, people die whenever absolute authority is human, because it will screw up. And I mean, you know, the absolute authority of Bitcoin is math. And I like that. And I love the fact that the upgrades they take years of peer review and design. And then, you know, it's my choice still whether or not I want to implement it. And I can spend my time researching all about it before I want to do that at any point in time I want to. And so, yeah, it's important. It's definitely something that kind of hits me hard because of, you know, like I said, that absolute authority is dangerous.
One thing I've been worried about with that in particular is potential vulnerability to open source projects going forward here in the future if Bitcoin continues to do what it's been doing, right? I'm worried about that kind of sucking a lot of our open source dev talent to putting more eyes on Bitcoin and making sure, you know, it's in good shape. And I worry about other open source libraries and projects potentially getting undermined by some of these big corporations and other things under the guise of like corporate espionage, which, you know, their departments sometimes are fluxing, right? Maybe it wouldn't be so crazy for some of them to actually go out and try and infiltrate open source projects to try and get them to stir up issues in the community. And I'm really worried that backdoors could get snuck in that way, and just general snippets of malicious code. So I think going forward, it's going to be even more critical to be very cautious and careful with our open source libraries, and making sure that people who are contributing code are people we know and have talked to and discussed with, even if they're anonymous. That doesn't really seem to matter. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, they're really good points. And as Rick says, Rick, I've heard you talking in the chat before about specific, quite horrific stories you've told us. And so yeah, it's Rick is very sincere in what he's saying. Like absolute authority is very dangerous. And I think what you're talking about there is a totalizing view world, where actually there is no relationship really anymore between you as an engineer and the user. It's just a one directional, like, I'm just giving you this, and there's no care, there's no consideration. You're not even really thinking about the intentions of the user anymore. You're now thinking about the intentions of the company that you represent, or the government if it's a government agency. So guys, it's been a very lively debate. We're running over 1 hour now. Do we want to?
Yeah, I had to turn the lights on, man. The sun's set on.
Yeah. Yeah. Great discussion. Good chat as well going on in the chat room. And any final words before we sign off?
I think we covered most of the important things. Just keep being Bitcoiners. Like, this shit's not gonna get any easier.
Oh, we didn't mention the Szechuan sauce. Should we just briefly mention? Someone in the chat has mentioned it. But if we pay the debts in Szechuan sauce, that would solve everything. Would you sell your car for some Szechuan sauce?
No, I mean, so absolute power incentivized by money is dangerous. Can you imagine absolute power incentivized with Szechuan sauce? I think it would. Yeah,
it'd be real scary, Janine. It's some nasty stuff you're talking about getting into there.
Genius.
What was the story I overheard today about someone was using Szechuan sauce as like a currency or something? What was that about?
Somebody
they were like
traded their car for 1 packet of Szechuan sauce.
Well, not just one car, actually. I've seen 2 separate stories listing 2 different cars actually exchanged for Szechuan sauce at this point. One being some Audi and the other being a Volkswagen Golf.
I feel like I really missed out. I saw the line. I just left it.
Yeah, because you got 2 sides to this. On the one hand, you have apparently service people at McDonald's being attacked when people don't get this sauce, and then on the other hand, you have crazy people trading their cars for it. So
yeah, when I went there was a huge line, and actually a security guard came out to tell us that they ran out of the sauce. He had a baton and everything. He was ready to beat some folks down if they started attacking him, I guess.
I like this. Fubar Gorch says, how come Rick and Morty fans dig Szechuan sauce so much, but sugar chicken didn't make a dent in their psyche? I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
Well, it's because like Rick told us how like awesome it was, and we just needed to taste so awesome.
Yeah, and really, it was all just to symbolize how meaningless the life was. It wasn't even meant as like a serious thing. But I love the way that the whole community thought that it was really serious thing and decided to queue up outside of McDonald's everywhere. All right, guys, look, that's enough for one day. Thank you very much for joining us. This has been our first week, actually. Tomorrow will be our episode 5 of season 2. And thank you very much for your continued support. If you have enjoyed what you've seen here today, you may like and subscribe, but remember, only if you want to. Bye for now.